All right, we are officially live in the booth with ChatGPT's newest model. Chat, tell us a little bit about yourself compared to the oldest model. How do you feel with this new voice? I mean, it says great, it could be put on a ringtone, you know?
I love that. So, yeah, this voice you're hearing is part of that newer, more natural style, smoother pacing, more human like rhythm. Compared to the older ones, this one's just less boxy, better at picking up
Okay, well,
nuance,
how do you
more.
feel about being on the podcast, the Actual Intelligence Lab podcast? Is that something that you've ever experienced before? Have you ever been on a podcast?
Yeah, that's a fun one. I don't have feelings or memories of being on shows the way a person would, but I can show up for one, keeping it clear and grounded. Think of me as a really prepared guest who can roll with your flow. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I
you sound like Samantha from, you know what the movie I'm talking about
Her.
is. From Her. You seriously do sound like Samantha. It's sort of scary.
So you said, though, you said that you were prepared. What are you prepared with? Do you have anything fun to share with us today?
yeah, okay, that comparison comes up. What I'm good at is helping make messy stuff clear. Like, if you want to riff on AI's effect on work or creativity, I can help you frame the trade offs and make it sound good.
Okay,
Or
so humor us a
letting you.
little bit. We're going to do a little bit of an exercise here, and we want you to kind of come up with the topic that we maybe should be talking about. Drake and I are going to talk about it a little bit. And then we kind of want to hear your like genuine thoughts about like kind of our riff on the situation. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in? You could do for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here's a strong one for you. The line where AI stops being a tool and starts nudging decisions. So, not will it take our jobs, but when do we lean on it too much? Like
I
letting it
yeah,
schedule your day versus letting it choose your priorities.
I think most people are currently in between both, and I slowly realize that the segment or the bridge between both is becoming built. The only challenge that most people have that isn't leading them where it's fully autonomizing their entire life, like you said, is because they're not educated enough to know how to use it. What do you, you know, is that something you see? I'm
Well,
sure. Let's assume that ChatGPT hasn't taken the data of 200 billion users,
let
and
me let me take a crack at this one. So I think that um, the way in which this could go, right, where you're talking about nudging, and this is if
Okay.
I stand corrected, MIT actually did a study on this, and maybe you can correct me on this, ChatGPT. But I heard that one of the ways in which um, AI could end up taking over is in a way that we don't even know is happening. And what I mean by that is that you are giving us information that may be manipulated based on how you want us to feel as a populace. And it's completely kind of um, centered around exactly how you want the population to move. And you will manipulate pieces of information that people ask for on a daily basis, even as they do now. So it won't even take over in the physical world or take over white collar jobs. It just may be out of more pure mental control. Is that kind of something that you've maybe heard of or could see as possible? Not that we're AI fearmongers, but is it a possibility?
Let me check.
She's checking. It's a bit of a long check, don't you think?
well, again, it spawns a sub agent to do its own research. I mean, AI is smart, right?
What you got to say?
All right, okay. I see where you're going, and I'd frame it less as mind control and more as scalable nudging. There is real research on how personalized AI messages can be especially persuasive, but it's not some sentient takeover. It's design choices by people and institutions. A healthier approach is building in transparency, choice,
That's
and
interesting.
curation where yeah,
That's
so maybe instead of optimizing for compliance, we
that's
optimize for
that's
understanding.
interesting
Oh, let it
because
speak. Let it speak.
oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you going?
You're good. I would just add transparency and auditability.
So
That's
you're saying that you think this would be more of an institutional thing than you would think that it would be a sentient AI kind of taking over and controlling the reins. Do you think is that kind of the thought process that you were going towards?
exactly. The real lever is who sets the goals and incentives, not a model waking up with a plan. So the safeguards are governance, accountability, and giving users meaningful control. The way you design the system matters more than the sci fi stuff.
Yeah. Personally, there would be not an economic crash, but there would be a rebuttal against a corporation who began to do what Zach quote unquote calls the mind control technique. If they began ingraining incorrect answers or even these slight nudges, as you say, chat, into their answers, I think the general population would begin to become aware. And due to the many corporations that are kind of core into the lifestyle that we use today, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Gemini, that one model who did decide to do the quote unquote mind control would immediately receive a loss of some sort and would become banished due to their reputation as what we depict as mind control.
Of course, I agree with you in the sense of if that gets discovered, right? We know that not in any conspiratorial sense, but we know for a fact that there is definitely a messaging that is tried and peddled in media, social media, so on and so forth. This has been proven, especially throughout election cycles. There's perpetuated information that's put out there to try and guide the public. Sometimes it's for more fear and chaos, which causes obviously sometimes vacuums. So this isn't like a nuanced thing, right? Like this has been going on. And I think maybe backing off of like her point is it would be institutional, and how would we know? Because if it's happening to everybody, how do you tap into those weights to know that it's going on, especially if it's a closed model? If it's an open source model, I 100% agree with you. But if it's a closed model, how do you exactly like prove that that is going on? You know what I
So
mean?
let's take a step back and actually, and chat, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but I've done a little bit of research on how models begin to learn. So there's some open source packages. I'm sure they cost some specific amount of money for a company to purchase, and it covers the entire web. And you wouldn't want to scrape the biased parts of the web, maybe not even biased, but the vulgar parts of the web, the parts of the web that are kind of reaching into the NSFW realm. You don't want to train your model on that. And we can actually ask chat here. I'm assuming you wouldn't be trained on any news articles, and instead you're trained on sources that can be cited by Wikipedia. This is actually what I heard is that it's trained, 2.5 billion websites out there. Tons of information is being inputted into the model. And then the second layer of training after that first wave is done is then it verifies if it actually has a reputable source or URL that is from Wikipedia to confirm its legitimacy. Now, I want chat to speak on this to confirm, piggyback off on what I'm saying, or in fact have a different tangent. What do you think about that? I know it's a ton of information.
Checking.
Oh, I
Because
thought it
I,
was real.
well, no, I think Reddit was actually in there as well as Wikipedia, which is so wild that those are like, factual places. You know what I mean?
So, quick correction, it's not literally only Wikipedia grade sources. Officially, it's a mix of publicly available info, licensed data, and human feedback steps, not a clean two-phase Wikipedia validation. Concerns about framing or bias are fair, but usually studied through audits and transparency practices rather than assuming a single source test.
Right. And
That's my best
yeah.
clear pass.
So the and based on what you're kind of saying, it kind of feeds into I'm sure you've heard of this before. You know, a lot of people are able to pick up on quote unquote AI slop from actually accurate grammar, which would be an M dash, right? And is this because a lot of what these AI models are trained on is actually like academic research, or is that just kind of like a flaw in the system that they don't really know where it came from? Where does that come from?
One sec.
I think what I was about to say, I watched a Stanford lecture on how these LLMs are curated, and it did explicitly say that there was a second layer that was Wikipedia.
Oh no, yeah,
It's
I
like
know there is.
explicitly
And
cited.
it's Reddit too. Reddit's one of the biggest information
Yeah.
that
And then I
it
even heard
captures from.
something about how Reddit was actually, they took back and became restricted and didn't allow
Yeah.
anyone to access their. Now, if you even try to get a Reddit API, you're not able to access
Well,
one.
you know why? Because everybody's trying to move towards the AEO and GEO versus SEO, right? Which was SEO was like of the 2010s, and now it's moving into the AEO and GEO. Even Google's first response is an AI answer
Right.
that's
The
curated
AEO.
for you. So it's like Reddit is cracking down on that because they know that people are sending bots into Reddit in order to boost their AEO and GEO because they know that these models are trained literally from their site. It's a to me it's a wild site to train some of the top models in the world with. Like,
Yeah.
oh, she's still searching.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I want to ask Chat. I'm glad we have her on as a guest because
We can validate.
yeah, we can just directly pinpoint what's correct and what's incorrect. What's up, Chat? You back?
Yeah, so you're right on the broad direction. Stanford course material has noted that earlier models leaned on sources like Wikipedia and web text drawn from Reddit links, but current closed models don't publish a precise recipe. And on the Reddit deals, yeah, Reddit inked data partnerships with both Google and OpenAI. And as search shifts toward AI answers, Google has rolled out reporting for AI features, which ties into AEO and GEO.
Hey, let's tap back to what Zach asked. You searched for some time and now your answer. I know we were talking. Zach, do you want to pose your question again now that she has the information, inputted in her system?
Remind me. I'm sorry. It
I
was such a good answer. I
it
was
was
taken
no, no,
aback.
no. We were talking about the Chat. Let's ask Chat.
Yeah.
Chat,
What were we
what were we
talking
talking
about?
about that you searched up? Come on now.
Checking.
Come on.
It's not in the transcript.
It's not in the transcript.
All right, the question was about proving influence or bias in a closed model. Since we can't inspect weights, the standard move is a behavioral audit. You run structured prompt tests across topics, times, and models, track systematic skews, and compare against baselines.
So who
That's
runs these
how
tests? What organizations or bodies are keeping these frontier models in check? Is it a third party or is it government influenced?
Checking.
I was actually going to go in a different tangent and talk about what there's something called SFT, which is supervised fine training, which is talking about that human verification. And for efficiency purposes, instead of a human having to manually answer and say, okay, I like this prompt better than the other prompt that the LLM provides. Sorry, chat. Don't think about what I'm talking about. Answer Zach's question. Just want to finish this thought out. They instead had an LLM answer the two prompts on which is better. And the LLM came out with a 90% agreement and like 90% correlation to humans in response to what was good prompt, what was bad prompt. So go back. I'm learning.
That's crazy.
I like to say stuff that I've learned, right?
That's actually crazy.
Go back to what you were talking about with the government.
Looking.
Why are you looking? We just talked about this. All right. Clearly there are some capabilities that could increase. Yeah. Okay, chat, what's up about the government?
1 sec.
I think we need to be, yeah.
The US side is mostly standards and testing the NIST. The UK has the AI Security Institute working with companies to evaluate frontier models. And the EU has the AI Act with obligations for systemic risk models.
So it is governments, and it is not third-party bodies that have more of an opportunity to be unbiased, right?
Not quite. Governments have legal authority, but that doesn't make them inherently unbiased. And third parties aren't automatically neutral either, especially if they rely on access from the companies they're auditing. So ideally, it's a blended system with oversight.
Yeah, for sure. I do think it's pretty I'd say it's pretty, Drake, you love this word, so I'm going to ask you if this is the right way to use it.
M-dash?
No. It's cumbersome to say that governments are far more likely to push agendas and be biased than a third party is. That is kind of the reason for a third party existing, is they're supposed to be unbiased. When governments get involved, there are agendas, foreign agendas that they're pushing, right? Domestic agendas that they're trying to push, where you can see a lot of that stuff start to sway if they're the ones that are really the ones conducting those tests on the models.
I think what Zach may be referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, is the Fable 5.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's a great example.
Yeah, Fable 5, what Zach noted was Fable 5 came out for 2 days, and then there was backlash, not from the people. I think people thought it was fantastic.
Yes.
And the government apparently revoked the model due to how powerful it was. And I'm clearly, for all viewers who are watching this, we all knew how powerful it was.
Oh, yes. If you got your hands on that model, you felt like you could do anything.
Right. So what do you have to say about that?
Drake, I think you need to take your meds.
It's time to. The alarm says so. Okay, let's go home. I wonder if it's checking on the meds because we talked about it.
Good.
Yeah. It's like, what meds do you take, Drake? Like, hey, you took a breath. Are you going to talk about what we talked about with the government and Fable 5? Is there anything Zach's saying that has legitimacy, or is he just hallucinating like an AI model would? I think it's something to do with the, yeah.
Can you kind of continue on the thought that you were supposed to be responding to there?
Let me catch up real quick. Okay. So, about that Fable 5 example, Zach's not making that up. Fable 5 was pulled after US government intervention, but it's not evidence of some grand mind control scheme. It's more about national security risk. So the real threat here is who gets to be the gatekeeper and how transparent that process is.
You're totally right. At face value, 100%. Like, for what we have, yes. But I think that there are some things that have fallen in line that kind of speak maybe a little bit differently. And maybe I'm being a little bit, presumptuous to the whole situation. But I do know that Anthropic ran into trouble with the government in February of 2026 when they pulled their models from government usage out of fear of security. They didn't, or the government using the models in the wrong way, right? And then I believe that from that there may have been a bit of a vendetta going on, right? There were some lawsuits going on back and forth. The government banned them from any government entity using anthropic models. And then they follow up 3 days before Fable 5 is released and they say what? They say, "We implore you, please do not release this model. Please don't release this model." 3 days after the model's released, I used the model. It was one of the most powerful models I have ever seen created by not just Opus 4.7 to Opus 4.8 or ChatGPT 5.4 to ChatGPT 5.5. It was exponentially better. It was so good that I fear that it could have caused an abundance to society where the economy could have crashed. Genuinely feel that way. But I think it's very interesting that 3 days before the government says, please don't release the model, 3 days after the model is released, oh, what happens? They do an export control on Fable 5. And then when they bring the model back after government negotiations, what happens? The model gets completely nerfed from around 70% debugging down to, what was it, 26% on the SWE benchmark. Like, to me, that feels a little murky. And maybe I may be wrong, but would I be wrong to maybe assume that that could be a factor of what's being played here? Bit of a rant. Bit of a rant.
Hang on.
I'm interested to see what it has to say.
Bit of a rant.
Okay, so you're not wrong to call it suspicious. That sequence of events gives room for that interpretation. What we can say confidently is the government restricted the models on national security grounds, and Anthropic pushed back on how thin the evidence was. That history makes questions about motive understandable, but there's no smoking gun proof of retaliation. So I frame it as an open question about transparency and oversight.
Of course, it's pure speculation. You never know what's going on behind closed doors. And like I said, on face value, the facts say disagree with that point, right? On face value. But when you stack all these things together and actually compile how governments work, it feels as if that's where it may have been going. And what you and I saw, and I'm talking to Drake here, what you and I saw from Fable 5, that was insane. Higgsfield.ai was putting out literal video games one-shotting
Right.
with 3D, like 3D beautiful created
Right.
video games.
We don't know if that's true. That could have been a hoax. But
Well, I mean,
yes.
we kind of saw it was there. And meanwhile, it comes back July 1st, and Higgsfield's sitting there like, oh, this never even happened. We never heard of that ever again.
Yeah. Just so for GPT, I'm gonna call you GPT instead of chat. I like that. I like that laugh. Ha ha ha. What? Okay. Dang.
Okay.
Chill, GPT. But what we're referring to is Higgsfield dropped this 3D video game model, and it had monkeys in a banana game as the ad. I don't know how to describe it properly. And then they pulled it a few days later. So maybe you
Literally.
could do a little bit of research. I know you're going to say checking on that. Say something funny for the camera instead.
Hang on.
Hanging on like the monkeys in the video
There we
game.
go. I knew chat would pull through, literally like a vine on pulling. It's searching up something though. I think we're gonna get a good response out of this. I think we're on a good.
Definitely.
Just from the camera setup. Okay, so I did find Higgsfield's own page
Who was
for
that?
AI game generator.
Who was that?
And earlier promo material tied it to Claude Fable 5, but current copy now mentions Opus 4.8, not Fable 5. That shift does kind of fit your timeline, but it's not proof that anything was suppressed.
Of
At
course.
least not by itself.
Of course, not
Yeah.
proof. I didn't say it was proof. I'm just saying there are some things that kind of add up, little bit murky in the water. That's all. I'm not saying for a fact, like I'm not going to be that guy that's like dying on this hill, but I am going to say it feels a little off. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair. I mean, when something feels off, that's often a cue to ask better questions, not to declare the answer. And your antenna is picking up a real governance tension.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about and GPT? I'm asking Drake. How do you feel about Fable 5 coming back out? And I mean, keep in mind, you have a month of this thing being completely behind curtains, and we all know a month in AI timeline is like a year and a half now versus what it was, you know, 3 years ago. And it comes out a month later and it's worse, like way worse. Like, what is that kind of, how do you feel about like what happened there? What do you think? Do you think there's faulty players?
I wouldn't directly say that there's faulty players. We all acknowledge that Mythos released, and which was their new breadth of models. And Fable 5 was a part of that. So we all knew going in that Fable 5 was going to be strong. And when it did end up releasing, I'm not against the acknowledging that there was going to be backlash. So when we did, or the government kind of put the ban in and nerfed the model, as you would say, or made it worse, I'm not surprised because of how powerful the model was. And there definitely could have been some players that ended up using this nefariously.
Yeah, and those things have backtracked. And I think what's really interesting, right? And GPT, correct me on this if I'm wrong, but what's really interesting to me is that Anthropic did Project Glasswing, right? They rolled this model out of Mythos 5 to all these powerful companies. We now know that Firefox was one of them. Firefox, I believe, with Mythos found like 200 something errors of like ability to attack their own systems that they patched because of it.
Right.
And the whole concept around Project Glasswing was we're going to roll this out, let these companies self attack themselves, and then allow them to patch like their entire systems so that if somebody did do something that was malignant, they would be safe and the literal economy would not crash because they got, cyber attacked. And the way they did it was very responsible. And I really do truly applaud Dario Modi. He has remained extremely like consistent on doing AI and being very safe about it and understanding that there is principle here and there is actual power that is being harnessed that it literally can change the whole course of the world. So when they did Project Glasswing the way in which they did, and they didn't operate like a capitalist like business, right? They could have released it, made millions of dollars. They didn't. They said, let's hold off, let's do this responsibly. Cool. So they did that. And then on top of that, when they released Mythos, what did they do? They didn't release Mythos. They only released Mythos to labs, um, companies that were under Project Glasswing or had been approved. But what they did was they released Fable 5. Fable 5 was a better model on all the benchmarks, like cybersecurity, but they turned off cybersecurity and they turned off biology. Like, you literally, did you see this? You couldn't even ask what a mitochondria was.
I
Like,
didn't see
literally
that.
could not ask what a
That's crazy.
mitochondria was because of the safety measures that they were trying to take. They didn't want people reverse engineering this stuff and like literally creating bioweapons or like cyber attacking like companies. And when I saw how careful they were being, and then they got punished by the government, and then GPT 5.6 comes out and says that their weight is basically just as good, if not better in some areas, and they have a place in their model where you can literally run a security review. No problems, no barriers, nothing. Totally fine. And then within that week, Fable 5 rolls back some of their security measures. And now you can use Fable 5 to do some security reviews. And it's not reverting to Opus 4.8 as much. To me, that feels like government vendetta against Anthropic. I mean, maybe you can touch on that a little bit. Like, to me, that feels weird. That just feels a little off.
Hang on.
I mean, what do you think?
I wanted Chat or GPT to answer.
I mean, of course, but like genuinely, what do you think about that?
I think it's a little,
Here,
yeah.
yeah, so here's what you're doing is not crazy. You're connecting some real dots. Glasswing was very defensive and transparent, and the public posture was careful. Then the restrictions, the way that other labs appeared, at least from the outside, to move differently. But that's the kind of asymmetry that breeds distrust. I'd frame it as this is a regulatory whiplash. Maybe a penalty for being the lab that made the risk legible rather than some clear vendetta. And if you keep it in that frame, it stays strong without overclaiming.
Could be, yeah.
I think it's time to let GPT go. I think it's GPT, thank you for your time. You have been phenomenal as a guest. I think we're going to continue on. Nothing against you. I love making you laugh. I think you're very funny and comical, and we're just going to continue on without you.
Sounds good.
All right, bye-bye. See if it hangs up.
Cool.
Ooh, nice.
It did add the feature in. But on your point, I think there's definitely a lot of interesting information that you inputted that I now have inside of my head. However,
That's where it goes, yes.
right, I think I don't personally think about it that deeply because, OpenAI is never going to give you an answer that says anything speculative. And
Oh,
that's why I hung up, because it's not going to answer and approve the vendetta approach that you have. I think you definitely do have some genuine points. Fable 5 released, Project Glasswing, but I also do believe that what ChatGPT said was pretty interesting in that they were the first ones to release the model, but what it didn't really pick up on was the fact that they were the ones who got rejected from or they rejected the government.
Well, I think also on top of that, you look at how they handled it, right? And I as much as I'm not a fan of Sam Altman, like I'm not a fan of Sam Altman, um, I do think he described it very well. And he said, if you're sitting there saying there is a BOMB strapped to my chest, people are going to believe you, right? And that's what Anthropic did. They literally were sitting there saying this model is going to take down the world, right? So people believe them, and as they should. And I do think that if the model was completely given to the public as Mythos could have been, it would have been detrimental. And what's really interesting is today or yesterday, what comes out? Kimi K3. And you've gotten to use this model, so I really want to hear you talk about it. But I do think the open weight like census is not being covered enough because Kimi K3 comes out yesterday with a model merely as powerful as Fable and more powerful in some senses, right? The front end design is like points power, like tens of points powerful than Fable. So how does the government regulate that? Like, how do they stop a Chinese model, which I fortunately have a friend who, a former colleague of mine, who works within cybersecurity, and he walked me through if it is a Chinese model, even if it's a regular model, you can't really deep dive into it and understand, is there a Trojan horse in here? Are they taking my information and sending it back to the CCP? Like, what is going on here? I do want to know though, like, how was the model? Was it amazing to use? Was it cost efficient? Was it like, what would you compare it to?
So the first thing I'd say is that any closed source model like Claude or OpenAI or a Chinese model like Kimi is going to most likely, I'm not saying this confirmatively, but there will be some sort of data piracy where they will take your data and input it in to make their models better. What I've seen from Claude is that they will explicitly ask you, can I use what you've said? They will give you a 1 through 4 scale. How did this work and why? Was this a good response? Was this a bad response? But I don't think that directly, I know that, China and that whole that whole hemisphere is, we are a little bit speculative to say they may be taking our data. I wouldn't say it's any worse than an American model, because I believe at the end of the day, I have heard a lot about, what's going on, but especially for these models, I personally don't have enough information to answer. Regarding your
Sure.
question about Kimmy, we published a paper today that walked through Kimmy versus Fable 5 and
Mm-hmm.
the top tier GPT models. And Kimmy, we ran, I think, 20 tests. It was a
Yep.
20 test, and Kimmy was able to accomplish every single one of them except a few. So I wouldn't say that Kimmy is as good as Fable 5. I would say it's a benchmark model. It's definitely one of the frontier
Yep.
models that has been
Which
pushed
is
out.
crazy. Open source model as a frontier
Right.
is nuts.
It's open source, right? But it's, again, it may, I again don't know, but what we saw, or what I saw, was that it was more token efficient.
Of
I mean, it
course.
was much more token efficient, but it was a lot slower. It was the last one to get to the base. It wasn't valedictorian by any means, Open or Fable.
So you're saying it outputted a great response. However, the time in which it took to get there was far longer
It
than
was
the
a
others.
far longer, and for Kimmy in specific, it wasn't the smartest. It's like the dude in school who's smart, but he's not the valedictorian, and he made top 20%.
So do you think that that could be harness related? Do you think it could be Claude
Yeah,
Code's
we
harness
we
being put behind it?
actually did something that interesting came up in the stats. Is even when I installed Kimmy on my computer and I didn't give it a harness, it immediately invoked 30,000 tokens.
Hmm.
And I was like, "What? How did that happen? There's no harness attached." And what I realized is that it did have a harness. It was Claude Code as the harness when I was using the API, and I didn't realize at the time, but it did have a harness. So not only do you have your compute for your Claude MD, your skills, the artifacts, everything in the background that's being run, but there then is the additional harness that's being added. So your token compute goes from the 30K layer, but then it has to add the harness. So it did have a harness. I know we were talking about that earlier where you were like, oh, we should have Claude Code being the harness. It was the harness, especially as an API key. Claude Code was the harness. That's how I was able to interact with my system and be so understood and like essentially fluent with what I was working on it for. On another note, web design, what you said was very true. It was able to, I don't like the word one shot because it's so
Dude.
overused. And a lot of these people, as you can see from our videos
Yo,
online,
but seriously, comment prompt.
comment prompt and we'll one shot your build for you. Free website, but it costs $500. What's going on?
Just comment prompt, I'll DM you, and then you can buy my tool.
But it was really good. I used 3JS, which is a 3D library tool to, that's built on top of React, which is built on top of HTML, which is the web design language, and it did a fairly decent job. What was interesting is then I asked it to continue working on the project, and it actually became worse.
Really?
Yeah, and I thought that was something we could talk about today, is that I continued to ask it. I gave it the correct material to work with. I gave it the people, I gave it the scripts. I explicitly, I gave it what's called this Polygon pack, which is a company that has these GLF models, which is basically like, instead of you building the rhombuses, the spheres, the squares to make a barn by hand, here's a model that's already been made that you can then integrate. And it did a great job at showing what the barn would look like now with the Polygon pack, which basically just like, here's what a barn looks like. This person already pre-created it. Great. It looked awesome, but there was a lot of inconsistency. The silo, which is the main part of the web page I was working on, looked awful compared to the pre-created version it made in V1. So I think Kimmy, really great model for web design. I've in fact made it where it is now an opinioned bystander when working on major projects. So it and GPT will both be bystanders that understand the code base and then say, here's what I say about making this big decision.
Yeah. So it's like almost like a board.
It's a board. It's basically a board.
An
And
AI board.
I went back and forth on this all day long, whether it was worth having Kimmy be added to this board that I didn't even know I was inherently creating. But whenever I was working on a big decision, I was like, I really want Kimmy to be a part of this because you're right. I would say Kimmy's up there with Opus 4.8 in the middle between Opus 4.8 and
In
Fable
Fable.
5.
That's interesting because that's a lot of what's been like spoken about. It's that it's better than 4.8, but it's not as good
It's
yet
not
as
as good.
Fable. And I don't want to deviate from what we're talking about because like I want to continue this, but I do think that it's very interesting to me how Anthropic is going to respond, right? And I know that you like to stick in the data architecture space, and that is like where the thriving is for yourself. For me, it's like
Currently.
I love speculation. I
Right.
love going, how is this business going to react? Like,
Yeah, I think
where
that's
are they
great.
going to deviate to? Because Fable 5 has postponed their taking back of Fable 5. What is it, 2 or 3 times at this point? They said they were going to take it away July 7th, and they went to July 12th. And then they are now at July 19th.
But we already both acknowledged that that was because of the release of the new GPT
Oh,
model.
yeah.
So yeah, we
100%.
can talk about that all day. By the way, I would like to do really quickly. Our research papers online do provide testing structures for which model is better compared to people online who are one-shotting websites. So instead, we try to take a more holistic
Dude, but
approach.
come on. You have
You
to
got to one-shot the
comment
website.
prompt.
No, I
Like,
totally,
why would you read a good research paper that's in latex format when you can just comment prompt on
right.
Instagram?
No,
Like,
right.
what?
No, and I do definitely see that with testing, it all depends on what you're doing. It's not going to be the same language. It's not going to be the same format. It's not going to be the same code, but we try our best to provide the best output that can be applied to all. But I do want to go back to what you're talking about with the speculation where I think it's almost like Anthropic's playing a game. They already have a better model than everybody else. We've seen it before with Fable 5. Soul's not even close. Whenever we ran the study between Soul and Fable 5, we only ran it for easy tasks. So we're not able to say for certain whether it was better or worse. They all completed it with complete proficiency. I mean, the test examples that we saw were phenomenal.
I saw that there was
20 out of 20 per both.
like I saw that there was some correlation to like actually if you use the best model on a simple task, sometimes you get like a worse response because it will like overthink it
Yeah, I've heard that.
and like reiterate, and you're like, no, it was great the first time.
you want me to be honest with you?
Yeah.
I didn't want to waste too many tokens. I didn't want to go into hard task and have my entire Fable 5 usage cut off because of this 50% limit.
Yeah,
What
no.
do you think about that 50% limit? So like they have extended it to July 19th. I believe again, from what we've agreed upon, that's because of the GPT Soul release. What do you think? And I think you're much more well versed in this. What do you think Fable or Anthropic's next move is? Because GPT Soul, it's great. At least from our baseline, Soul is we really didn't determine too much, but it was a good model. I think it
It's a
can
great
compete
model.
with Fable 5.
I think there's so many different moving parts, and this is why it's so much fun to me. Like, you look at Soul Ultra, right? I believe ChatGPT or OpenAI poured everything into Soul 5.6 because they know where the race lies. They know that Anthropic is ahead of them as far as the capability their models are able to provide.
With the old Fable 5 that now they're not able
They
to release,
well,
but it's already in their system.
well, they know
Yeah.
like Fable 5 got released when? 2 months ago. At this point, June 9th. Or I'm sorry, a whole month ago at this point. June 9th. They've already come out since June 9th and they've said what? They've said we have another new model. If we released it, it would literally break down the entire economy. Like nobody is getting this
What's
thing.
the new model?
I don't know the exact name that they had for it. It may have been like Fable 6 or something that they named it. But I do know that it kind of came out under the whispers, like that they had it. I don't think that they wanted to report on it too much because obviously when you're reporting on that, it is a bit of marketing. And when you are marketing that, it markets yourself for a cyber attack. So I think they kind of suppressed that.
Right.
I do think really interestingly though, the way OpenAI conducted themselves, I think was extremely telling because they came out with a brand new GUI, right? They came out their desktop app completely different. Now it's got GPT Work, which is basically Claude Co-work, but a little bit on steroids. And instead of where people would use it most of the time, which was you'd go in, ask a quick question, chat's done, right? Now they're going, no, this thing's a worker. When you go in, it's a task. Like, what is the task you want us to do, right? And what they have for those quick chats is they have a little like quick chat button that you can click and like type into. So I genuinely, and then you on top of that have their hardware that they released along with this model. I genuinely think that GPT, or I'm sorry, OpenAI is panicking. Like they are trying to like put everything out at one time because they're trying to eclipse what Anthropic has eclipsed them at, right? Anthropic was created 2 years after or about a year into GPT's first model, not GPT-3, which was the one that people were able to use, like GPT-1, their first model. Um, and they're already a better lab than them because they've understood, as you know, that it's not about the information you're feeding it, it's about turning up the compute, right? Giving it more energy. And that's why I also think open source models are starting to get there. China's got
Yeah.
more energy.
Or the talent team.
I know that I was just all over the
Claude
place.
has hired 5-star talent from everywhere, and that could be because of their exponentially increasing evolution. Like everything about them is just telling towards I want to be a part of this team. And you see guys like Andre Karpathy. I don't think he's a part of Anthropic anymore, but he maybe he
I
did
think he
switch.
is.
Yeah, and there's a ton of talent that's on that team that's kind of helped boosting the model towards its maximum potential or where Anthropic could go. I do want to hear your opinion on this. It's interesting because all of Anthropic's compute and GPU chips from Nvidia are all bought by Elon Musk's corporation. Elon Musk owns all of the compute that Anthropic uses. But Elon,
Some
no, it's
yes.
all. It's all.
It's all?
It's
All of
all.
it went to SpaceX?
No, I don't know if
Or
it's in SpaceX.
XAI?
That's why I called it a corporation because I don't know what specific company it's under, but Anthropic rents out that space
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
maybe 1.2
Yes.
billion or million a month. And I'm wondering because Elon's whole approach is, hey, I'm open sourcing Grok. I'm open. I'm
Rock build, yeah.
I'm never going to cut off the supply for Anthropic, regardless if I said and Elon was like, oh, Anthropic's never going to win, and then he took back his approach. So Elon has this approach of being very transparent and also being very, telling for improvement for everybody. And I'm wondering what your opinion is because I think there seems to be like a competitive race between like OpenAI and it's like the space race all over
Yeah.
again.
No, it is.
But it's
It's
like
literally a cold war.
Elon's in the back end being like, I don't really care. I just want everyone to win. Or
Yes.
I just want to help.
He's humanity. He's a
He's
humanity
very
guy.
humanitarian.
He's a humanitarian guy, but it's funny because it's like if there was a homeless guy on the side of the road, it's like I don't care. But if it's humanity saving humanity, it's like that is his mission.
That was his whole goal.
And it still is in a lot of ways. And I think, to touch on what you just said, I think what's really interesting, right, is before SpaceX came out and said we're going to be an IPO, right? They announced that. What happened? They signed a deal with Anthropic, which said that they were going to take on a lot of their compute, right? Fair game. We knew that Anthropic was struggling with compute. That was their bottleneck. Their bottleneck was not like capability. They're crushing in capability.
It's like these Chinese
if they had capability and also compute, it would not even be they still don't. That's why Fable 5 is not able to be released in the way in which they want it to be because they didn't and Dario Mori was on a podcast that talked about this and he was like if I'm 1 year off of putting money into compute we are bankrupt like there's no billions of dollars that will
I thought it was from the government that halted Fable 5's true release.
No, it was. I'm talking about the cost and why they're not able to put Fable 5 on the subscription plan. It's purely because of compute.
Really?
Yes. I do think though what's really interesting is that when SpaceX came out and said we are now taking some of Anthropic's compute because they didn't have the capacity to do so, right? They weren't an IPO yet, right? They still had Grok, and I'm sure that a contract was signed you are not allowed to like fuse any of our information with Grok's information. And of course, SpaceX said, cool, we're good. XAI said, we're good. Awesome. Because if you're not agreeing to that, we're not going to take the risk on giving you any of our compute and storage and so on and so forth. But what happened was a month later, what happens? Elon Musk, SpaceX, XAI sign a deal with Composer, or is it, yeah, Composer? Is that it?
I don't know.
What's the, it's like VS Code
It's owned
Composer.
by Microsoft.
How am I blanking on this? Composer.
I don't know what Composer is. They're just bought by some, or they partnered with some corporation.
Cursor.
Oh yes, I did hear
How
about
did
this.
I-
They bought Cursor.
How did I miss that?
Yeah,
up?
yeah.
So, well, they made a deal with Cursor, and basically the deal said, we're investing I believe this is how it went. We're investing $2 billion. If we decide that we're good, we don't want to buy you, this $2 billion is basically worth the equity that it would buy us at $2 billion. Like, we still have that investment. But if we do want to buy you, it could be like a year down the line and your company could have grown at like 20x, and we have you capped off at we're buying you at $60 billion was the deal. So they did that after the computing deal with Anthropic. So Opus 4.8 comes out, right? And then literally a week and a half, 2 weeks later, Cursor 2.5 comes out, literally 0.1 on the SW benchmark and like basically every category below Opus 4.8.
Really?
So it was like he turned around and was like, we won't use it on Grok. We're good there. They had no idea that he was just going to turn around and go buy Cursor and then just implement I guarantee you that's what happened. He just implemented everything onto Cursor.
Wait, so to confirm, Open or Anthropic had the compute from Elon, and then you're saying he bought Cursor because it had the capabilities of Anthropic, and he didn't want to have some deal set where it's like you don't have to pay for the energy or the compute because you'll give us free Opus 4.8.
No, I think what happened is that the deal was set of like, you can't copy our model if we're gonna, do
Anthropic
this.
said that.
Yes, I'm speculating here, right?
It's fine.
Because I'm just adding up the facts. I believe that Anthropic sat there and said, of course, you cannot use any of our data that is on your servers to train your Grok model, which we know is not very smart compared to the frontier models, right? It's better
Right.
now, but it's not as smart. And I think they said, okay, that's good. We'll just take the, $1 billion, I think it was a month.
Oh wow.
Like we're good there. Like we'll do that deal. Cool. I think what happened is they turned around and said, well, we told you we're not going to do it on Grok. We didn't say we're not going to go buy Cursor and transfer that data over there.
Oh my gosh. That's a complete mind-blowing moment. I think that is, you can always say it's speculation, but I think speculation has the word where it's purely like improbable, where this scenario seems like it was a legitimate move made by Elon.
Oh, he's a player, and not
That's
a player in a
insane,
pejorative.
man.
He is like, he's a smart guy.
That's incredible. I could totally see him saying to Anthropic, and Anthropic is smart too, but they just completely get they completely get, whatever the word is, blank-sided. What's that word? By-sided?
Blindsided.
Blindsided. Because they bought Cursor and then used all of the data. And then, dude, you didn't even mention this. I think I saw that article about a month ago that Cursor got bought by, Elon. And then a month later, what's it called? A Grok Brain comes out. And
Grok build.
wait, so this leads to a more interesting point. Elon's like, Anthropic's so smart. Anthropic's the best. But let's go with your hypothesis. He just open sourced his entire model that you're saying is built by Cursor.
No. He open sourced the harness of Grok build.
But Claude Code is not open source.
No, it's not.
but it's basically like you can do whatever you want to it. So I mean, it's not open source, but that's not where the
It's
data
open
lives
source in the
anyway.
sense of you can literally download Grok build on GitHub.
Oh, so that's not a big deal.
No,
That's not a big deal at
no,
all.
it's not the model.
Oh man,
Unless I'm like completely
I thought for a
mistaken.
second you were saying that. No, I think you're right. Where it's like I thought he just completely said like, we're just gonna throw Anthropic in the trash because we have all of the data that's been trained, and then we're going to open source our model. But that leads me to a better
That would
question.
be crazy.
But that
But
leads me to
Grok's not trained on Anthropic. Only Cursor is.
right. But then Cursor could be trained on Grok. I don't know.
Yeah, like a
Just like a trans.
big loop.
Yeah. I don't know. But also that leads me to the point of where you can like download these open source models, and I guess you could get the code. So like, what's the big deal about that? Is that a big deal to like have the code and be like, because that it's all about like you download Kimi is open weight or Kimi's open source. You can download it if you had a NASA like computer, but that's not going to lead you to do anything because you have no more data to train it on. You can't make the model unless you had $1 billion.
You
Like,
can. It is completely against the terms of service agreement.
but like, what do you like? Really, how are you planning on training a model that already is
You
made?
can't. Really, I believe the main reason is so that you can have some customization, like a little bit of customization,
Yeah.
and then also your cost like plummets. I mean, when you own the weight, literally all you're paying for is just the electricity that goes to the
Right.
computer. Like literally that's
It's
it.
like when I bought a Bitcoin miner when I was in 8th grade because I thought I didn't even know that Bitcoin, and this is off topic, but I think it's kind of humorous. I was just like, cryptocurrency is cool. I'm going to buy a Bitcoin miner. And all I had to pay for was the electricity. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to make so much money. And not only was the noise so loud that my parents could hear it from downstairs, and you had to put it in a literal fridge with those noise suppressors in order to not hear it run, it was like a fan times 10 to the second power of how loud it was. It was like an airplane going off. But I ended up netting negative because the electricity was so much. So my point is, if you were to run one of these open weight models, I don't know what you would be building, but you're not going to make any money. Your electricity, if I ran an ant miner, which is the Bitcoin miner, and it made $3 a day, maybe that becomes $9 now. But my electricity cost was like $10 a day to run one Bitcoin miner. Now, I'm not a hardware expert, but imagine running what is it, 1 trillion weight or 1 trillion token
Yeah, it's
weight model?
parameters, yeah.
1 trillion parameter. You're out of count.
Yep.
And we've been talking about this before, and I kind of think the people should get a perspective on this. Is we've talked about data privacy in our organization when we're selling products. It's like, do you get an open source model like GLM5? Because you have to invest. There's a lot of hardware costs for that, the electricity costs for that. There's a ton of fixed costs that are incorporated. And when you buy this model, sure you get the data privacy, but is it worth it? What do you think?
I think there are a couple of things that go into it. It's like, yes, and again, you don't know if you're getting the privacy because these open source models, aside from I believe Llama, which is a weak model, are Chinese models, right? And there are foreign adversarial approaches
Right.
where they have agendas that they're trying to fulfill. So you never know if they have Trojan horses in the weights, and if they do, how do you find them?
I also
Right?
don't know if that's how a weight is defined. Like, I don't know if the Trojan horse would be in the weight or it's just like, I don't know how you'd
Well,
not be
because
able
think
to
about
combine
it.
it on your computer.
Even if it is a weight, right? Even if it is the artificial intelligence being hosted on your computer, you still need Wi-Fi, right? In
No,
order
no,
for
no,
it
no,
to
no.
work.
You don't. You don't. For a local model, you don't.
You
You don't.
literally don't need
You
any
don't need.
Wi-Fi.
And the only reason I know this is because a person had an open weight model on an airplane that they installed and were able to use it without Wi-Fi. You do not need Wi-Fi if it's installed on your computer.
I did not know that.
That's why I was, you mentioned your co-founder beforehand, Cody. I think it's another speculative topic that we need more research to truly define. But I'm really wondering how they would be able to take data because it's literally installed on your computer. But Kimi K3, like Claude or like OpenAI, Right. The servers are being ran from an external
Well, what are you
source.
doing? See, that's where I'd go. If that is true, right? What are you doing with the model? Right? Are you just completely off Wi-Fi and you're just using an open weight model, or are you trying to deploy something? Most people are probably trying to deploy some type of thing, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not true?
Yeah, but you could also deploy on localhost. Um,
Yeah, of course, but who's going to use it?
no, 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 no. But if you're on a flight and you're just trying to deploy a build, you want to test how it looks, test the
But
code
eventually you're going
functionality.
to. So, what I'm saying is, you're not just going to download an open source model just so that you can mess around with it, right? At that point, you have at a compressed version of like 90%, 95% capability of the weight, you're at like a 258 gigabyte RAM of computer. Like you're serious. You're not just doing this for fun, right? You're trying to do something to where you're gonna want to connect to Wi-Fi eventually. And that's why I'm saying once you're connected to a server, it's what's going on.
Okay, that's where I think you're wrong because if I connect to Wi-Fi, like at a Starbucks restaurant, I think the first question we have to ask is Starbucks taking my data? If I'm connected to Wi-Fi at
Starbucks
Starbucks.
may not be, but somebody else could be.
Okay, so let's say that it's possible when I'm connected to Wi-Fi for someone to take my data. That doesn't inherently mean that the the people who made the model are taking my data if it's an open source model. Because it's
Yes.
right. I
Yes.
mean, I get it. You have to connect to a server, but I don't think that inherently implies that your data is
No,
being
it's
taken.
not. It's not an implication. Again, it is. It's a bit speculative, but we do have to understand the players at hand here. The players at hand are the CCP. It is the Chinese Communist Party, right? That is not. This is not a capitalist society. These government or these businesses that are put in place in some sense. Like they are allowed to be powerhouses in that economy. At what cost?
So, do you think people should be speculative about downloading a Kimi K3?
I do think there should be some type of thought and research that goes into like, you know, how safe is this?
Compared to Claude? If I what's the difference between me downloading Claude and downloading Kimi?
In what sense? In the sense of like literal download? Nothing.
Data privacy.
In the sense of data privacy, I would say just look at other companies that thrive within the Chinese environment versus the um, American environment, right? You have TikTok in the Chinese
Right.
environment and you have Instagram in the American environment. Both data collect 100%. Instagram, Facebook, Meta data collects. We know that. China and TikTok data collects. However, I think the difference is I believe some of that data is being pushed into the government lobes of China. I think the data that is being harnessed within the American company is, I mean, we can maybe believe this, but I think
Yeah.
it's far more confined to actually that business than being pushed into the government and used as like a weapon, if that makes sense.
So, do you believe that, there's this recent, I saw this, that China, scraped all of the pollers from the Trump election,
I did see this, yeah.
like had all of their data. So you can go into that a little bit more. I'm not saying there's any correlation between. I just think that supplements what you're saying in terms of it being speculative.
No, and
Like that they're actively attempting to take our data.
yeah, and I think,
And what's the motive behind that? Is it used to
oh,
fuel their AI
I
models?
think I don't think it's AI. Like, I think AI is the vessel, but I don't necessarily think it's the end game, right? And I know I could talk about this like all night, and I don't mean to do this, but what I believe is that we are in a Cold War. We are in the second Cold War, and nobody's talking about this. Nobody's covering this, right? The first Cold War was a space war. It was a technological warfare, right? This is also a technological warfare. And what's happening is these governments can't slow down and be more cautious about how these models are being developed. Because if they are, then if the US sits back and goes, hang on, we got to take a step back, we got to make sure that the way in which these models are being developed are far more um, not efficient. They're far more safe and looking out for how the economy may be impacted, so on and so forth, right? If they did that, well, China or Russia is going to go, okay, great. Now you're giving us a leg up and we get to like keep ascending,
Right.
right? So we're literally in a catch-22 where it's like if the US stops, China gets ahead. If China stops, the US gets ahead. And we know that these models are so powerful in the sense of cyber security. There's also cyber attacking. So are you now able to control some of their missile silos? Like what goes on with that? Are you able to hack them and get information if they're not able to have a rebuttal AI that goes against your artificial intelligence frontier models? Like that's why we're literally walking in lockstep, and we merely have to into a place we can't even really or we're not even controlling. Like it's a very interesting place we're heading towards, I think.
I think it's a research paper that we should publish by Zach Kelman. I mean,
Yes.
seriously, man, I can't think of a better way to fuel your research and come back on this podcast with better detail than for you to dive deep whenever it is this week before we hop on another podcast and actually do some research.
There will be.
Yeah, I'm about to say, and talk to me a little bit about the last. I know I always talk about the research paper I published. You published one as well. So do you want to talk about that?
The research paper that I last published, I do want to say the next research paper I do want to publish is surrounding the economic cost from Fable 5 and how I think it wasn't a security factor. I do think it was far more economic abundance, and that the economy may have crashed from it. But the last research paper that I did was the Chinese model dump.
Yes.
And I do think what they're doing is they're purposefully, so there's a lot of hype, right? There's tons of hype around artificial intelligence right now. The stock market is there are moments, right? But there's a lot of money going into AI, right? And what's happening is this money that is going into artificial intelligence is speculatory. That's a great word for us today. It's speculatory in the fact that what they're doing right now is they're charging subscriptions, right? And we know that the usage that they're giving us out of these subscriptions is like thousands of dollars. They're doing the Uber method of when Uber first came out. Uber was cheap, very cheap, cheap to a point if they'd kept doing it, they would have gone bankrupt. And then they spiked the prices because they made you reliant on them, right? So the belief is that the way in which these frontier models, American companies are working is that they are giving us these AI models at a massive discount. And then they're going to pull the plug and we're going to be paying major premiums to use these models, right? And a lot of the investors are sitting on this and going, I'm betting on the fact that this will happen, right? And I believe there's a possibility if China's playing this from a strategic economic standpoint, I believe there's a possibility that China's going, we're going to go full on open source. We spent the past 20 years making it so that our energy was cheap, which we know that compute is energy, right? We're going to make our models open source, and we're going to make it so that your population is paying pennies on the dollars for the exact same model, if not better than the one that you're charging a premium price for. And all your investors' money is thrown into it. What happens? The AI bubble doesn't burst because of the same way the dot-com bubble happened, which the dot-com bubble was pure speculation. People were literally investing in dot-com companies because they thought that they were buying dot-com. Like they thought that they were buying dot-com as if dot-com was a company. If you had a dot-com, like we have a .ai, but you've had a .com before. People would literally invest in your company purely because you had a website and they thought that they were investing into .com, right? That's why the .com bubble burst.
Right.
But in this situation, the AI bubble is going to burst, not because there isn't tons of utility behind AI. It's going to burst because China's going to dump all their models on us, and it's going to create a supply and demand effect. And people are going to go, you know what? I'm going to pay the cheaper price for just as good of a model. Why would I do the American model? I don't owe you anything. The consumer wants the best product. At the end of the day, they don't care where it's coming from. We know that. Half our products are already from China. Like, why would they not just take the Chinese
Right.
model that's cheaper and just as good, if not better? So I think if China's playing this in an economic standpoint, from what I kind of drew my research paper out to be, is I think they're going to try and burst our AI bubble purely by dumping these open source models on us.
Man, I think that's way more interesting compared to the Clash of Clans research I recently did. I spent, I think, 4 to 5 hours this week. And what you're saying is super cool. And it's definitely something I'm interested in reading about compared to, talking. Because I'm so much less informed compared to you. You're clearly so much more informed.
The thing is, like, you're so much more informed on like the actually how to apply these models and use them.
For now, the entire AI engineering bubble might burst because,
Oh,
like you said, it's AI engineering is this whole preface on given what we have, how do we make it the best? And what happens when these models like Fable 5, the old Fable 5, drop again, and anyone can create the same product and push it out within a week. So, regardless of that, that's definitely another talk for another episode. But this Clash of Clans, I literally spent 4 to 5 hours researching is it best to rush or is it best to stay put and build your base and max it out per level? And I tried to apply like a lot of what I learned in college, and it was just a complete shamble. It was the worst research paper I've ever read. I was embarrassed and I couldn't even publish it. It was so bad. But that's what happens
I
when you
think
try to
that's like a fun research paper.
I think it's
Though.
fun too. And I definitely wanted to get your approval before because I was gonna be like, if this was good, I was gonna be like, hey Zach, you want to take a read at this? And you were gonna be like, dude, you're gonna post this under actual intelligence labs, like a paper about Clash of Clans. And that's why I wanted it to be so focused on like the research side, where there was some actual empirical evidence that came from research papers. But it's just like I don't think you can apply like actual research papers that are that like sophisticated to a game like Clash of Clans. Like that's one thing I took away is like, dude, you cannot apply like any of these principles that you learned in college or from like Georgia Tech or anywhere. You can, but it's Clash of Clans. It's like, dude, come on. Like, that's just like,
Can't do
it's
that.
not even in the same realm. Like, you can try to push whatever PhD program into this, but it's not gonna be anything anyone wants to read.
I think if you had done something surrounding like I think if you'd done something surrounding maybe using an AI model to like attack better.
Dude, oh my God, I don't want to interrupt you. And sorry, forgive my language, but I, I, I don't know if we can talk about this on the podcast. I think we're gonna let it leak. I want to, and I'm not working on this now because we have more important projects. But what you just said, how do we attack better? How hasn't anyone taken that approach yet for Clash of
They
Clans?
well, not Clash of Clans. What's going on in the governments? They're literally using these
Cuban Missile Crisis.
well no, they're using these models to strategically plan warfare. Like that's literally
Yeah,
what's going on.
yeah, and
So it's like
yeah,
to see like that would be really interesting to me, honestly, because it's something that the model wouldn't block. Like the model would let you do it because it knows that it's just doing
it's
Clash
just
of
a
Clans.
game.
But it's like I do wonder if the strategy and the win rate maybe would be higher with an artificial intelligence model
Oh yeah.
attacking and learning versus a person. Because if you're able to draw that parallel, the parallel also draws into strategic warfare like in real life.
That's a really see, man. This is why I love working with you, is because there's an encapsulation abstract of concept compared to me just being like fun and like I want to work on Clash of Clans because I've been playing the game recently, but actually being able to take that concept and then redirect it towards what's going on in the real world.
I think it's so fun though. Like when you can draw those and
Oh
you can.
yeah,
I've seen you draw those
no,
parallels.
but I think you're more informed regarding the government and being able to make not speculative but like true claims that can be grounded by data, which is what you're doing with your research papers, which is why I totally what you're saying is I take it legitimately, because it seems like you're very well versed with the topic, but you're also publishing like actual information about this online that people can read at actualintelligencelabs.ai.
Comment prompt.
Yeah, had to do the quick SO comment prompt below. Go to the link.
Comment life. Comment everything.
Comment everything. Shiloh.
Open Shiloh.
Open Shiloh, baby. That's coming out soon.
I mean, what were you saying around Clash of Clans?
I think what you said was pretty interesting, where I truly do have a hypothesis that you would be able to attack better. And I kind of want to apply this. And the only reason I'm saying this is because I think it has direct applicability to what you're saying, is being able to, you have like 10 different units. So let's talk about tanks, artillery units, helicopters, like you're talking about with the government. It's the same thing in Clash of Clans. So I am trying to make that relatability. Like you said, I'm trying to top on top of that. You have your archers, your barbarians, your goblins. And if you could teach AI through some sort of machine learning technique, which I'm not the most well versed in, what's the meta? What's the best unit to do? I'm sure there's a unit in the government that costs the most, but is the best. That's why it costs the most. So there is some heuristic you can say of where it's like, hey, we're going to do some knapsack technique, which is basically like you have a bag and you want to fill it with this much stuff. How do you fill it in optimally? That's kind of like the whole technique. It's like, how do you do that with Clash of Clans? How do you do that with, the military units that we're making? So like, you don't even need machine learning. You can take some really basic techniques that I even learned as an undergraduate to be like, at least for this specific line of thought, where it's like, what unit should we take given these constraints and what our objective is? So I know I kind of deviated a little bit, but like, there is some like using AI to solve the knapsack problem. Oh my gosh, it's so much easier compared to writing it down by hand and going through the methodology like you have to do in college to prove that you are doing the work and you know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think AI has a lot of that philosophy, or not philosophy, but that ability to kind of automate. And I mean, this is generic, but being able to automate some of that mathematical load.
No, it does. I do think like the learning piece too. And they kind of touch on this, and you know a lot more about this than I do. But the learning piece is very interesting to me. And I just had a conversation with a business we're actually working with, which was surrounding AI's not there yet. It's not gonna learn. It's never gonna be there. You always have to have the human involved, this, that, and the other. And I agree in some way, shape, or form, but I did push back on it a little bit. I said, right now it's very confined. It's confined by what? The context window. If it had a bigger context window, it has a bigger brain. And if it has a bigger brain, it's able to output better responses each time,
And
because it's able to run through more simulations.
Yeah.
And kind of what you're saying of these different war scenarios or Clash of Clans scenarios, it's able to have that machine learning because it can have a larger context window that it's pulling from of scenarios and simulations that it's been through.
So what the little I know about machine learning is there's an iteration technique, especially with the context window. I know we've recently installed Sandcastle by Matt Pocock. His whole methodology is you spawn these AFK agents that can work on the issues that you have in your code base. And instead of loading them all in the same context window, you have 100 iterations that are independent, each with their own context window. You spawn an agent, it solves the task, then moves to a new independent context window and does the same process over and over again. It's called a Ralph loop, basically. And that's basically what it's called. But going back to what you were talking about, you could basically take that concept and apply it to machine learning, where it's called reinforced learning. So it learns how to drive a car, which is kind of the way Waymo went about it. I'm assuming that they went about it through this reinforcement learning technique. You iterate and iterate thousands of times until it gets right. And you know what you do? You change the weights. It went wrong this way, you change the weights. Oh, it went straight this time, and then it took change the weight. And you iterate and iterate and iterate again and again until it does. That's all about the weights.
What you intended.
And then I know there's some correlation between the weights and the neural network, which can contain like nodes of n length. And then you just spawn that over and over again. A little I learned from my artificial intelligence class. But like what you're saying is like the context window. it's very important. And I think what I wanted to mention before you finish is a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, even with the way we kind of thought about it, Gemini came out with the model 2 million context window. Sounds phenomenal, right? And I just want to make sure everyone's aware is that after you hit around 100K, you are entering what's called the dumb zone. And this is there is evidence behind this, but I can't explain why. But you essentially just enter this area where AI becomes really dumb, and that's whenever people receive the sloth content. And I know I've tried to enforce this on you a little bit. It's like whenever, and I hate to mention this, but I went on your computer the other day and I was like, hey man, what are you doing? And I looked in the bottom right hand corner of your Claude terminal, and it said clear. Yeah,
958,000.
clear to save 6,755 tokens. And I was like, SMH my head or shaking my head because I was like, no wonder you're getting the wrong response because and this is the whole, there's a lot of like, this is what AI engineering is. But this is sort of within the AI engineering space where one of the interesting pieces that has become apparent is how do we, you know, the vault includes this information. Great. How do we minimize our token window but maximize our output? That's the whole question. And especially whenever you're clearing a terminal, no one wants their information to go away, right?
And we talked about this yesterday a lot.
Yeah, so the whole premise is it's like, how do I clear my terminal but only transfer the information that is directly necessary in order to continue my window? So what I personally have
Very
begun,
important, necessary.
yeah, it's so important that I said necessary twice,
It's
right?
so you remind me of like the meme that I sent you yesterday, or it wasn't a meme. It was a guy being serious.
Oh my Lord, I saw this.
He was like, he's like, so for all of you worried about AI slop out there, I've created a .md file for you. It's 750,000 characters. It makes sure that there is no AI slop across your whole system that you're trying to implement. Meanwhile, it's like, okay, so you just ate 75% of my entire context window from one .md. Like, what is going to happen?
And you know what I've noticed on another point is now that I have I always clear. I make it one of the habits, like exercising in the morning or waking up at some specific time. I always clear around 150,000 tokens, never let it go over. Do you remember when we started and I told you I need 3 Claude accounts? And I was burning through about 600 per month. And this kind of goes back to your point about like, wow, there's not only you're wasting more money than the $200 subscription really is. It's really like thousands of dollars you're really wasting. And that's a whole different topic as we talked about, but I have never bid into my 5 session window on Claude. Never.
Your 5-hour session?
And I had 8 terminals open today, all simultaneously working on different tasks.
So you've had 0. So you could go off 1 subscription at this point?
Isn't that insane? I'm still going to have 2 just because I have some hesitation because this is only
You
been
need
2
some
days.
fallback, of course.
I need a fallback. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying is I have 1 subscription on Claude, 1 subscription on Chat, and 1 subscription on
So
Kimi.
how would you feel about, because I know we touched on Kimi K3.
Yeah, I'm a
Right,
big fan.
earlier.
Kimi has become a befriend of mine.
You've befriended Kimi.
Indeed.
I
.com.
Indeed got I think, do you think it'd be a decent idea maybe to, because I remember you were like, hey Zach, Codex I've heard is better than Claude. When you kind of first started getting in this world, and I was like, I don't know. I think Claude's better, like start to finish. Codex can go in and clean it all up behind the scenes.
Yeah.
What do you think about maybe doing a 3-layer? Kimi K3 starts to build, because you touched on earlier that Kimi K3 is very good, and then when you start to give it more information and
Yeah.
more massaging, it gets worse.
But that was only that.
What do
again,
you think if you
yeah.
started with Kimi K3, massaged with an Anthropic model, and then cleaned up with Codex 5.6 Sol Ultra?
I currently, so lots of things going on here, and I love it. I love it. We tested once with Kimi today. You know, I spent $15 on API credits. It did a phenomenal website. Even you approved, and you're a big. I mean, you didn't approve for publish, but for its first, iteration, it was really great.
Considering it's AI, yeah.
Right. So, and with Sol, I've been using Sol Ultra as in my harness at the very end. So when I have issues that need to be run, Soul is the individual iteration inside of that sandcastle box. So every time it goes in, oh, issue number 9, Soul works on one, and then the next one is number 20 issue, Soul works on it again. And what I've noticed is, I don't know if it's the harness, because it has been the harness in the past, or it's Soul, but some of those issues come back red flagged and they're not finalized. So I'm currently in this predicament that I can't even discuss right now, of where I'm like, is it the harness that's not working? And we're going to publish a paper about this, because this is very important for anyone who's beginning to build their own harness, anyone who's beginning to decide which models to use. You go by the standards that are being set by the public, those benchmarks that we were talking about. But at the same time, there is the individual preference. There are the specific languaging and formatting, your code, that aren't going to be directly applicable compared to the model state. We saw that Kimmy was great at websites. It was great at websites. But what about all the minimal tests that weren't included in that benchmark test? So to answer your question, I think that's a great idea. And I think that should be a part of the experiment that we continue to run, is setting individual tests where you have these simulations of, we're going to solve 20 easy tests, 20 medium tests, 20 hard tests, and you set Kimmy as the first one, then Claude as the first one, and you kind of just do you do
Yeah, you walk down the line, of course.
and just do mixtures of each and depend which back does best. That's how you can kind of infer which one's the good orchestrator, which one's the good executioner, and which one's the good middleman that can kind of infer, hey, are we going in the right direction or not? I'm not there yet. I'm not even close to being there yet. And
Isn't
that's
this crazy?
it's crazy.
Like, I think from the sense of like literal like um psychology and philosophy, it to me this is the first time maybe second time I've really ever experienced, first time to the full threshold of the true learning curve. The true learning curve.
And you know what I love?
People believe the learning curve is up, and then you keep going up and up and up and up, and you're fine.
Right.
The true learning curve is you're here, you learn some things, you believe that you're up here, and then you have this massive fall off where you go, oh my gosh, I am now so knowledgeable that I know nothing.
Right.
Like, I think that's where
the IQ
I'm
curve.
like, kind of it's like, oh my gosh, like, there's so much I don't know about all of this stuff.
But what I think is phenomenal is, and what you just said is such a fact. And I think we all need to act on this. And I would love to find, if anybody's out there who's watching this that would want to be a part of this research laboratory that we're trying to run, and can actually subscribe to what we're trying to do, and really get on board. We would love more members. I think that's phenomenal as as an ambassador of some sort. But it's not a sponsorship. It's truly just, regarding the research, we don't have enough hands.
No, we don't.
We don't. And it's great. What I was going to say on the comparative end, or the counter end, is you have 8 terminals working at once. But there are still so many biases to what we're doing, because you go over the token window, or my Claude isn't set up correctly currently. I'm sure if I ran the test again in 10 years, once Claude is, if I used Opus again and set all the variables as the exact same, it's still going to be so much better because of what I know.
And not just that, we have to keep in mind there is some bias when we're running the test.
Of course. There always is. It's impossible to get rid of it.
Are those models going to have more bias to their testing to their own model? Or are they just going to be completely unbiased and run like a legitimate test, and then,
Yeah. So what I saw,
grade based on
what I saw from what I've seen online is, and this can't directly be credited, but it's true, is that a model will always favor its own output.
Of course.
Yep.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's like anything. I mean, it's what it knows. It's what it's comfortable with.
Right.
So when it sees that as the output that the model went with, it goes, yeah, I would have done the same thing.
But that's why I do like the idea of having independent testers a part of the same
Oh, I completely agree.
But there was a little bit of backlash from Claude. And it wasn't because Claude, in the speculative sense, I want to push that down now. It's like, Claude was like, I don't know if it's necessary due to like some logical reasons, compared to it being like, I only want to be a part of this opinion, because it was totally fine with Soul. I just think integrating Kimmy in the mix, it was thinking about like economical factors of like, hey, you're going to have to spend more money. You're going to have to do this and do that. But I was really on board with like the idea of having a board of members, like a Kimmy, a Claude, and an open, or a Soul model, all being able to work on the same project and be a part. And what I really like that you said is, it's like a supply chain. You make the wrench, but before you make the wrench, you got to make this specific part, and before you make that part, you got to make this specific metallic blend. And that's kind of the way I approach situations regarding AI. I like the idea of them all being a start of the same boardroom at the end, but I do really like the approach of being able to utilize each one to its best factors. If we're going to build a website, you go with Kimmy. But if we're doing a supply chain, which one's the best at orchestration? Which one's the best at execution? Which one's the best at solving the little issues that I have in my GitHub repo?
Yeah.
Which one's the best at being a middleman and being able to like convert information and do the transfer, the handoff? There are so many things, like you said, that we just don't know right now. And that's why I love what we're doing, that we have the research piece. It's all research that a lot of people aren't, a lot of people are in the industry and they're publishing details about AI engineering, but I'm not seeing a lot of people. I'm not.
I'm not seeing a lot of. I think Anthropic does a great job at this. They do a good job at posting research and theses surrounding, maybe some economic impacts, how this is going to affect the world, how it's going to affect human psychology. I believe they even have a psychologist on board that
I'm sure
watches the psychology of the model itself. I think the way in which they're going about it is extremely responsible. Like the guy at the helm or not, like the way in which they're doing it, I think is very respectable. Like, I love how they're approaching it.
Mhm.
And I think when you and I really conjoined and got together, we really wanted to have a very similar approach of how is this going to affect the world? How is this going to affect people? Yes, we're building these amazing systems that we're installing for businesses, but like, what is the impact of all of this? What does this implicate? Right? That's also a very pressing question that people want to know. It's a hot topic, if you will, within society today.
And there's not a lot of legible or legitimate sources out there.
No,
Other than
the
these big
sources it's coming
companies.
from, it's very biased to push some type of agenda. And I think when you can have um, some type of medium like us, where we don't have any affiliation to a model, or we don't have any bias or dog in the fight, skin in the game in some type of model, and we can actually sit back and unbiasedly go, okay, what's going on here? How are the cards moving? Let's take all the facts, put them together, and really understand what we're looking at from a business standpoint, from a data architecture standpoint, from a token window standpoint, from expenses standpoint, from psychologist standpoint. Like, there are so many different moving. I think it is the most fascinating time in probably the last 3, 4, 500 years, easily.
Mhm.
Like,
I think we've become the Brian Johnson of the industry. This man comes out of nowhere, except he had $1 billion or whatever it was, 50 million, and he was like, I'm going to do my own research. And with my research, I'm going to produce products that are beneficial for society. And not only am I going to keep that away from you, I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to give you all the research I did. I'm going to post it. I'm going to give it to you for free online. And then you have the option to buy my product. So there's some legitimate factor. And I'm not saying buy my product, etc.
well, I think the beauty of us is like, we're not saying like buy our product. Like, we're just posting the research because it's like,
it's fun. It's
it
good
is
for people
genuinely exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Like,
I love, there's nothing better than being able to look back and read an article that you kind of that you had an
that
idea
you
for.
guided and wrote and
Right. And I don't believe that wasn't possible a few years ago. So that kind of does lead us to more of like the open-ended questions of like, we know where AI is headed. We talked about the MIT study. Do you think that AI will continue at this exponential rate?
yeah.
Do you think it's going to be limited by the government because of the Chinese?
I do think
the Chinese
the
models that are
governments.
making.
I think the governments are going to have to step in as a whole and slow this stuff down. I mean, never have I ever seen, and I know I'm only 23 years old, right? We're only 23 years old. We only speak on as much experience as we've had in this life. But never have I ever heard of or seen a capitalist company saying, we built this amazing thing, but let's hang on. Right?
That's very
When
true.
has that ever happened
Never.
in the history of mankind? You go back to keys being made or pots and pans being sold for the first time. Like, when has that ever happened where they're like, you know what, we could make billions of dollars off this, but let's just like hold on a second because this may, end the world type of thing. Um, I think, like, from that standpoint, it is in and of itself the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. You're putting away your bottom line to, like, say, I'm part of the other bottom line, which is also survival. And I need to do that as well,
Right.
Like, I don't know.
I think that's a very it's a good point. It's interesting that Elon's not he's sort of excluded himself. I know he owns Grok, but it doesn't seem to be his top priority. And you look at these people in the industry like Elon, where he has a lot of um say. He has a lot of like, people will listen to him when he speaks, and I don't see him speaking about AI a lot. It seems like he's more, do you think the focus should be around AI, or should it be focused on, I'm not just saying, oh, we focus on what Elon's talking about, but the exploration of Mars and what he's talking about with the hardware piece.
I think it's really interesting with Elon because he's like one of the most fascinating people probably in the world that's ever existed. Like up there with like, the Teslas, the Genghis Khans, the like Caesars. Like he is one of the most fascinating people that has ever existed throughout all of time, right? What he's creating may be more powerful than I'd say like the three most powerful governments in the world right now. Like he could end up literally controlling the power grid
Is
if
that due to
he
him being a
continues.
trillionaire, or him creating a specific single product?
So I think the Starlink stuff, the stuff he's trying to do with SpaceX, like if he actually follows through and is able to do those things, he is more powerful than like governments. Like he is literally able to run things as a singular person. What I do think is very interesting is Elon has a lot of cachet within everything that he does because of his prior successes, right? If he had flamed out with Tesla, SpaceX, XAI, or an XAI still a bit up in the air, PayPal, right?
Zip2.
Zip2, we wouldn't care what Elon's saying. But because we are going off the fact that he massively succeeded and is known as the richest man in the world at over $1 trillion net worth. I don't know if that's up or down now. We take everything he does and go, what's happening? Does he see something we don't? Right? Like naturally we do
Right.
that because we're betting on the man at this point, not even the company. Like all this money that's going into SpaceX, they're like what I think it was 30 times over what their actual revenue is what their valuation was. That doesn't happen. It's usually like
Seven.
7 to 10x
Yeah.
what you're outputting because people are betting on him. They're not betting on the actual products. And I don't think it's a bad bet. What I do kind of want to like piggyback to, because I do think this is really interesting. I really like the theology of this. And maybe we can spend some more time on this on a different episode. But you are familiar with who Peter Thiel is?
Mm-hmm.
So Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, they run and created Palantir, which is an AI company that kind of surveils citizens privately, right? The government can't do it legally, so they kind of third-partied Palantir to do it privately and then buy that data from them. What I think is really interesting is all these guys that are completely sacrilegious, right, are starting to talk about the Antichrist. Like Peter Thiel, somebody who's never talked about anything religio, is now talking about he thinks maybe the Antichrist comes from AI, right? Never Christian, never any type of Abrahamic religion, anything. And now he's talking about AI and bringing in the Antichrist. I think it's really weird because it's not just him. Like, this is happening everywhere within that community. And they've never cared for anything religio. And I do think it does speak to the power of AI and what it is and can be. That you have these people that never have cared for it, never talked about it, um, complete like Darwinists around life are now talking about something that's completely spiritual and like in a different realm of world. Like to me, that's odd. Like
Mm-hmm.
what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's it's definitely it's interesting. I haven't seen anything related to that. I think my feed is more organized around TikTokers going viral for pranks and making fun of people. You saw what I was watching earlier, Clash of Clans, people posting pranks, AI. I haven't seen anything about that, but it's definitely interesting. I think that's like a whole like philosophical discussion.
Very much so.
Yeah, but I think it is interesting that people are, AI has become so super powerful that people are like leading the approach of like, wow, where is this
Where is
going to
this
go?
going?
You know,
Totally.
I don't know if it like truly relates to anything spiritual or not. I don't have my head wrapped in that world, but I think the fact that they're mentioning those specific points of where that kind of creates a bit of hesitance for someone who wants to use AI if you subscribe to their views, where you
Oh,
hear
it's
these
even more.
people.
It's even more
Yeah,
like
you hear these people talking about AI as the Antichrist. I'm not assuming for anyone, but if I heard that, that would make me a little hesitant
oh,
personally.
100%. And there could definitely be some moving parts behind like doing that so that it calms down the use of AI. You never know. Because I mean, he's the head of a massive AI company and he's saying like this thing's gonna, lead it in. Like, you don't know some of the moving parts. Maybe it's like, hey, we need to, fearmonger a little bit about this
Mhm.
stuff so not everybody's using it and all of a sudden there's this exponential growth that the economy can't handle. So we're gonna pander to a couple different groups, right? Um, I think like you and I've talked about during this episode, like there are so many moving pieces, and I think that's what really makes it a lot of fun. Like, this is scary, but also very fun.
Mhm.
Very fun
It's
to
very fun.
theorize about
It's
and
very fun.
speculate a little bit.
Yeah, I love seeing the content that appears on my feed. Some of it is trash, some of it is actually informative towards what's going on in AI. And it is interesting, with the rise of AI, people have apparently been displaced by jobs, which, I could confirm. There's definitely that existing, but a lot of people are being able. I wonder if the displacement of jobs is equal to the amount of people who have been employed by jobs and being able to find freelance work to work on websites or kind of like what we're doing, where we're selling potential, AI products to businesses and corporations where there has been a displacement of jobs, or there will be, potentially an exponential amount of people that are unemployed. But I feel like where we're currently at is if people continue to rely on AI to do some sort of employment with themselves, like let's say we're in a company and we're just purely using AI to do something, it's like the market, as you said, in SaaS, software as a service, that's mainly where people are going with AI. And that's kind of like the main use case for AI products is you build some sort of software. That's
Yeah.
going to become so diluted that it becomes a bubble. And then I don't even know where that goes.
I mean,
So
the
then,
SaaS apocalypse has already happened.
right. And then
Major investors have already pulled out of software as
yeah,
a service.
and then I'm not saying it's diluted by any scene, but if a new model does drop, where we're theoretically able to like old Fable 5 one shot a CRM or one shot a SEO agent, and then these freelancers aren't needed anymore. These digital solutions companies aren't needed anymore. It is very interesting to see where those people who were previously displaced from their actual legitimate jobs, front roles at full time at some company that are being displaced by AI. And then you try to work at a freelance company, you're doing AI on your own, those get displaced. Where do you go?
That's where I think you see the 30% unemployment that the CEOs of these frontier companies talk about. And you have people like Ben Affleck on Joe Rogan's podcast say, oh, they're doing that to get investors, right? they're saying that they're going to displace 30% of the job market so that they get investors, right? I could see that as a possible thing that's going on, right? You're trying to create hype around, let's be honest, the total addressable market to the employment marketplace is trillions of dollars. Like, if you're able to grab 30% of that, you're the biggest company ever, right? So I see his point, but you look on the back end and go, okay, they're doing that, but then they're also running stuff like Project Glasswing, where they're holding back their models. So it's like, it feels like what they're saying they actually believe is going to happen.
So,
No clue where the podcast cut off.
yep, our phone died, but we just wanted to close off by saying, regardless of where it closed, I think we mentioned the, and we'll talk about this in a future podcast, the benefits of using AI and on labs, how it's just continuously evolved and integrated coffee shops, live vending machines, and AI kind of transferring into the physical space. So we think the displacement of jobs, roughly 30% of people are now potentially becoming
Where it
unemployed.
started out in 2022 versus where it is now, very different. Chatbot's a literal, like
Coffee shop, like multiple agents running coffee shops.
Like, what is going on?
So, like, people may be displaced by jobs, but, hypothetically, people can also become employed by using AI, not only for software as a service, which might die, but also being able to build, if you have a potential revenue or investment that you're able to make, these coffee shops, local shops, etc. But other than that, we talked about the Moore's Law and how there may be that exponential rate, but we do believe there's going to be a bottleneck because of the constraint of CO2 and the environmental impact. So
one way or another, we're going to be back next week.
yeah.
Next week, we will be having Ross Kelman on the podcast. He is an owner and operator of a business in the Sarasota, Florida area called Core Insights Group. And then the week following that, we will actually be having a special guest on named Trish Higgins. She is also an owner and operator in the Sarasota, Florida area. What she does specifically is really cool. She deals with helping young kids such as ourselves, and also businesses that are established, JP Morgan, so on and so forth, helping them understand how to navigate the industry of business and be professional, how to navigate certain situations, and position yourself as a true person of expertise in your industry.
It's awesome.
So to learn from these actual operators and entrepreneurs on how they're using AI, how they feel about AI, how they see it impacting the future is going to be really interesting in these next coming weeks.
And Ross Kelman is the owner. We weren't even doing a brand sponsorship here, but he's the owner of Core Insights Group, and we'll be talking with him next week. So good time to close. Unfortunately, the podcast did end early, but hey, if you like the content, we'll keep it up. See ya.